Hey guys and gals, thank you for watching. It's a bit different today. Joe's not in, but we do have a couple of special guests that are coming on. I know that the stream link has just come out. If you found us on Twitter, come and say hello. And yeah, let me know down in the comments how you guys went this week. Now, round 19 was a bit tricky. It's a shame Joe's not here because there's a lot of episodes, a lot of encounters, a lot of people who should have been on for the Joe versus the MRO. It is a bit crazy. We're talking SuperCoach, mate, some players should have probably been pretty pinged. Hopefully you guys are doing okay. Let me know down in the comments, hey, how's it going? Now, I'm just plugging all the socials, so give me a sec. I'll be up and about in a minute. 1 second. Hopefully everyone's doing quite well on your Monday as well. It's going to be a fun one. Now, if we talk AFL, round 19 in the AFL. Mate, let's have a quick look at how round 19 went. Let me pull up the share screen. Now, round 19, there are a lot of wins in here that were very, very close. And there were some wins that weren't very close. We have a look. Like, I know Joe's not very happy about Essendon versus Adelaide, but it's a game that they probably should have won. And I don't think that they're going to get this many more chances throughout the season. It's a bit of a rough one for them. As we always say, as Velo says, it is what it is. A lot of missed opportunities. And something I'll say, we have a look. The umpires do play a role. They do play a factor. What can you do? But when your team goes 17 and 11, it's that 11 which stings. 1 or 2 bad scores going either way doesn't really work out. But that 11, mate, it sucks. Let's quickly check out the other games. I got 7 tips this week. Hopefully you guys got some higher tips than me. It would have been pretty tricky to get 8 or 9 because I think a lot of people would have picked Essendon at home. Another one that a lot of people would have picked, I think I missed out on the Dogs this week. I know Joe got 8. We were kind of divided on which one of us were going to win from this game. Yeah, 8 or 9, mate. You're doing very, very well this week. Moving down the list. So there, I think Giants versus Suns, no Touk Miller, no Wits. I mean, what are you going to do, right? It's a game that should have been won, and they did win. Moving down the list. Nice for St Kilda to have a bounce-back game. One of those, one of those free games throughout the year that, not saying North Melbourne's one of those, but West Coast definitely is at the moment. So, yeah, one of those things. Big upset round this week was Hawthorn versus Collingwood. And I know there were a lot of Collingwood fans. I don't know if it's ever since Joe and I went to the Collingwood-Geelong game a couple of weeks ago, they just haven't been performing as well as what they should have. Everyone's always seen kind of the footage of Ginnivan at the moment. He's loving life at the moment. And Collingwood's in real trouble. It sucks because they don't have a first-round pick. Remember, this happened a couple of years ago when they picked up Dacos. And, yeah, it was great for them. But at the moment, it really sucks because you're getting a first-round pick. Yeah, not good. One of our 2 guests has just jumped on. He's been on the show before. Mr. Stats Man, Big Jaden. How you doing, Jaden?
Hello. Good to be here.
Thanks for coming on. I know it was a bit of short notice, but we're covering for Joe not being here. I know it's going to be a fun day and, we're just kind of going through the games at the moment. Looking at these first 3 or so games or 4 games, anything in here that you thought was a bit of an upset or didn't go the way that you thought it was going to go this week?
Well, yeah, I'm a Pies fan, so I thought hopefully we could have gotten a bit closer, but credit to Hawthorn, they were amazing. It was a great game to watch from that point of view, and I'm happy for them getting a great win. So, yeah, that was great to watch.
Yeah, it's a bit of a tricky one. We're just talking about like Ginnivan and kind of what he did, and as someone, one of the oppositions, do you think it was a bit out of taste, or do you think kind of a bit warranted with how he left the club at the end of last year?
I think, like, all the context aside, I think it was great. Like, I love the bit of personality that he showed, and I actually thought it was really good when he, like, went up to the Collingwood fans and was like, giving them a bit. I love that, and I think there should be more of it. And good on him. At least he's enjoying himself. So if you've got a problem with that, then gee, yeah. Because these are the same Collingwood fans last year that loved him and defended him in every single possible scenario. So come on, guys.
Yeah, it's a bit one of those tricky things. I think when a player of that caliber, but also just that kind of attitude, leaves a club like that, it's a tough one, right? I mean, I haven't seen a lot of Carlton fans, like a lot of Carlton players leave, but I imagine if like a Darcy Fogarty or someone like that they've kind of brought up and trained and given a chance to, if they now come on because they've been kicked out of the team and start to dominate, it's I can imagine they'd be a bit grouchy as well. Yeah. Now, guys, we do have our third guest for today. He's been on the show. Bit of a guy blast from the past. I did jump on the channel a few weeks ago and talk some North Melbourne. But we've got Tom from SuperCoach, mates. How you doing, mate?
Hey, how are you?
I'm good. We're just kind of running through the games of the weekend at the moment. Any games in these first four here that you thought were upsets, you didn't pick in your tips, that kind of thing?
I mean, definitely just straight off the bat, looking at your screen now, the bottom three, so the Giants game, Saints game, Hawks game, I tipped all the winners there. But, yeah, the standout one was the Essendon and Adelaide game. I definitely thought if Essendon were going to rubber stamp their credentials as a top four side, as much as I don't think they are. Apologies to any Essendon fans out there. But, I think they were really disappointing. As much as it was an upset win for the Crows, they kind of really starting to show their weaknesses in regards to they're not finishing off games strongly. They're really starting to falter late in games. I don't know whether that's an experience kind of perspective of not being in those situations as enough. I think there's a bit of concern in the defensive line. I've always been very harsh on their defensive half with not having the ability to lock down games as best as they can. They've got weapons all around the field with attacking players like Redmond, Martin, Ridley and the sort, but key defensive stocks, I think they're in a bit of trouble with there, and I think that's a big reason why they're leaking goals late. And Merritt seems the only person to give a shit in that side with regards to his emotions post-game. He was really strong with how disappointed he was, and it really seems to Essendon fans that they're slipping a slippery slope which could end in a car crash come finals time. But yeah, it's all wait to be seen.
Yeah, 100%. I'd probably put Caddy in that list as well as someone who seems like he cares, but I wonder if that's just a first year player, finally broken into the team, that kind of thing. We're speaking to Joe off air today, obviously not on the show at the moment, and Essendon's low percentage is probably what's going to keep them out of the 8, unfortunately. Even if they win the next couple, I think something like the top 11 or 12 are on similar points as well, so it's going to be a real kind of fight back to make it into the top 8. Well, to keep their top 8 spot. Yeah. Just sucks that Caldwell. I don't know if you guys have Caldwell in your SuperCoach teams or not in the forward line, but yeah, the fact that he missed out majority of the fourth quarter kind of hurt them a lot. What do you reckon, Jaden?
Yeah, I have him, and he's been going amazingly well. But I do think he's becoming one of their better players now, and pretty reliable. He's definitely had the talent, so now he's got that role, and he's a big miss, especially with his impact over the last few weeks. So it was unfortunate for them, but they had their chances as well, which I think they'll probably be pretty annoyed about.
Yeah, definitely. I'm just glad as an owner. I'm not sure if you have him or not, Tom, but as an owner, he only got kicked off because he was going into concussion protocols. He's not actually concussed. So he should be right to play this week, barring injuries, of course.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. All right, let's check out the next couple of games. Maybe we'll come and say hello to some of the people that are on. Joshua, how you doing, mate? Thanks for jumping on. Butters VC into Neil C this week. I thought I did bad with Zach Merritt into Butters, but Butters VC into Neil C. I'm not sure if you guys have seen something worse.
Yeah, I mean, I was in the same boat as you with regards to the fact that I thought, merit average, Butters surely dominates. But yeah, I
Mm,
didn't actually watch the game, but I heard that Liam Baker and Seth Campbell are doing tagging roles in him, which is unforeseen circumstances with regards to Richmond's tagging capabilities. But yeah, it was definitely frustrating owning him. He
mm,
was having low tog on ground, and from what I could see, and it was super frustrating. But I thought, oh shit, here goes a really solid score down the drain. But you look at
mhm,
Sunday's games, and Neil rocks around with Dunkley, and I had a feeling coming into it that they were going to tag him at some point. I know he had a really good first quarter. I think he scored like 30 odd points in the first quarter, and I was like, oh shit, here comes a
yeah,
130,
I
and then
saw
all of a
that too.
sudden James Jordan comes around and decides no to that, and completely halted his momentum or anything, and it just makes it seem even more ridiculous. I was speaking to Nathan in our own kind of round review podcast that we recorded just before jumping on here, that it just seems a bit ridiculous that teams aren't tagging Neil, and I don't know if that's a structural thing or they think that Neil can get away with the tag a lot of the time.
Mhm,
But I think he and Merritt in particular, and I'm just saying that because I own Merritt as well from a super coach perspective. It just seems I don't understand why teams don't go after those players more often, because they set up so much in the midfield. Not necessarily from a disposal point of view, but when they get the ball, something good happens, and it often
mm.
results into goals. And it just shows that Windhager did it when we played him a while back, and he nullified him pretty well, and James Jordan and like really shut him down quite quickly. So it is interesting to see why teams aren't doing it more often.
Yeah, it seems like something that they kind of, if there is a tag, it goes to Neil, but rarely do they tag both and that. Jaden, who were your captains and vice captains for round 19?
I actually mucked it up a bit, and I didn't have any options to loop with, so I missed the early Saturday lockout, and I had to go
Yep.
with Nick Dacos's VC, which is a bit unfortunate just to have a
Mm-hmm.
crack. And then I went into Butters because I didn't take the VC, so yeah, a bit unfortunate, but I wouldn't
It
do it any
happens, bro.
differently, or I would
Yeah.
not make the mistake, but I would still captain Butters. So, yeah, bit unfortunate, but
I think
can't
a lot of
control it
us were
really.
looking at the team sheets, and it was just like, oh, no Graham, cool. Well, we're okay from there on, and then didn't work out that way. So Port got the win, but they didn't do that well. Moving down the comments. Ooh, hi, Michael. How you doing? Thanks for jumping on. Yeah, 24-17 this week. Pretty good score considering a few people kind of didn't work out that well. Unbranded. How you doing? Hey, Velo. Yep, bloody North Melbourne should have won. Tell you what, I don't know what your guys' kind of thoughts on that game was, but yeah, North should have won there. Adelaide don't travel well. Don't know how Essendon lost. Thank goodness for SuperCoach. The only thing that's keeping me interested at the moment as a West Coast supporter. What do you guys reckon? Kind of when your team's not doing well, something like SuperCoach to kind of keep you over. And I know it was the opposite for Joe for the longest time as well. His team was doing terrible, but Essendon were doing well. Now it seems like they just can't catch a break.
I mean, obviously my super coach team is doing all right this season, but yeah, St Kilda's obviously not doing so well.
Mm,
But I guess if you're into your super coach and whatnot, it's a good distraction, and I think we've mentioned it multiple times in different podcasts of the like, and I know we've had different content creators say the same thing. Is when you do watch different, like as in super coach, it kind of allows you to watch different games with a different lens on it, a more analytical lens, and takes a bit, if your team gets smashed in a game, and obviously West Coast is a good example because they get torched as have been torched in most recent years, but it allows you to kind of obviously root for a player or a team, and it makes watching a little bit more entertaining. That's for sure.
yeah. Same for you, Jaden.
Yeah, definitely. Coming from a bit more of a numbers side, like it's so good to just watch as many games as possible, and having players in every game just helps so much because you want to watch it. And even like I've been playing the AFLW for a few years, and like playing fantasy just really engages you so much in the actual
Yeah.
sport. Like I would never have watched it in the first few years, but now that there's the fantasy platform, like I just love it. So like I just think it's amazing how much owning players can do to your interest in the game. So yeah, it's great.
Yeah, 100% for me, especially last year as well. I mean, North Melbourne doing well in the women's game. Didn't win the grand final, but that's okay. I wouldn't have watched it if it wasn't for fantasy. And it's just kind of picking up on the players and things like that. And, I'll admit it, just in football in general. Like, I think for a period of time there, I'd fallen off being a North Melbourne fan and whatnot. And then, kind of something like SuperCoach to bring you back to the game and be like, cool, well, now you watch a lot more of not just your team, but everyone else as well. Velo's saying here, hard to can't score well in SuperCoach when you've got 4 zeros. Now, I don't know how many trades you guys have left in your team, but there were some people that had gassed out of all their trades like 3 weeks ago. I'm talking Skodfather here, who has had a small drop in rankings over the last couple of weeks, but kind of shows how much coverage is key, right?
Oh yeah, 100%. I know I'm stuck with one trade left, and I was in a pretty tight position with regards to when I was able to pull that trigger. I know it was essentially a trade I did 2 weeks ago now, where I had the option of, I think it was Meek and what's his face? Meek and I forgot the name, but Meek and someone else for essentially 260k in the bank, compared to a Lockie Neal and a Nan Curvis with no money in the bank. Obviously, now it's looking like a better trade bringing Meek in because Nank's out for a week. But
yes,
having that cash in play is, I think, really beneficial. I've obviously got a proportionate amount of it with one trade left, with enough ability to get a Kruger or a Jai Clark up to a premium, which is handy. I think Tim Michelle also mentioned on Twitter he's in a similar position where it's like you almost don't know when to pull that trigger of using that one trade, whether it is to swap a injured player. And I guess the downside of that is if, say, hypothetically speaking, Nick Dacos gets injured, whatnot, and I've got 260k left. Obviously, I can get anyone I want, but that means I've used that last trade and I've got still about 200k left over. So it's frustrating to have that money in the bank. But if I do use that money elsewhere and upgrade a rookie, say I'm thinking about a Kruger to someone this week and have a 23rd premium, then you've got coverage with DPP and whatnot. But then all of a sudden, like for myself, I don't have defensive cover. If any one of my 6 defenders goes down the last 4 rounds, I'm fucked because I don't have any DPP coverage or nothing. I'm playing a 0 on field every week, or as long as that injury lasts. So it's a fine line, because obviously you don't want to end the season with 260k in one trade in the bank. But yeah, it'd be interesting to see what other people think about having that extra trade and when to actually use it in only 5 rounds left where there's not much wriggle room.
Yeah, coverage versus score on field, Jaden.
Yeah, well, to be honest, I'm in the 0 trade camp. I used it.
Me too.
Round 18, so I'm all out. But I think I'm in an all right position. I was pretty keen to just kind of finish my team a bit, get all premium. So I was I'm just going to do it. Because it's that situation you just talked about, whether you keep all that money or you just hold the trade a bit. So I just went for it. I kind of had to because I had Gawn and Fisher at the same time. But because I owned Jackson, I ended up holding Gawn, which worked out quite well compared to holding Fisher based on his performances. Hopefully Gawn is back this week. And I've got I had Elliot Yeo, who missed this week, but Evans on the bench stepping up with 110. Pretty lucky there. So I'm holding it together. Got cover in every line. So we'll see how we go.
Yeah, I think that's the same for me. I don't know. We'll put up my team in a little bit, but I've got Evans on the bench, and it's frustrating when he outscores Houston and Nick Martin in your back line, and Luke Ryan, and you can't do the swap. But I think it's more just a coverage thing. I ran out of a trade. I think Gawn's been out for 2 weeks, so coming up to round 17 is when I spent my last trade. Gawn to Cherry. I think as well, as long as you've got coverage, you're doing okay there. So just unlucky for a few people. Corey scored 23-35 with Butters C. Yeah. Ouch. That's all I'm going to say there. Jeremy Cameron, Toby Green, and Rowell. Oh, Matt Rowell. Has there been a bigger, not a bigger flop, but a bigger downfall in scoring? I know that he was average. I think he was like 3rd or 4th average in total. Almost coming up to his bye, and then since then he's just fall off. I know Ryan from Freo's kind of done it a little bit, but Matt Rowell, did you guys own him at any point? And what's happened to Matt Rowell is kind of the question, right?
Yeah, I never owned him. I owned Took Miller, which was just as disappointing. But yeah, no, it's interesting from a kind of watch perspective, like watching him live. He doesn't seem to correlate or translate his scores well into fantasy, which is one red flag. Like, obviously, there's some question marks in when Lockie Neal's a good example where he scores Super and SuperCoach average in fantasy, I think, bar his spike scores. But yeah, Rowell really doesn't translate well into fantasy, and it kind of highlights how important his contested work around the ground, in stoppages is. And if you take away that aspect of the game, whether it is the Gold Coast midfield getting stomped and whether it is you put another contested beast on Rowell to kind of nullify his impact, he just doesn't get it around the ground as much. You got Anderson who does that job, Miller does that job, any other midfielder through there does that job across Rowell. Rowell is essentially there to get the ball out to those players. And if he just can't get his hands on the ball enough and effectively, I don't think he's going to score that well. I mean, like, you just have to look at his contested numbers now compared to the start of the season. His was through the roof. It was insane. And it was just not sustainable. Like, even for the best in the business, it's going to drop off eventually. And we know how bad Gold Coast are away from home, and they're obviously not going to play every game up at Gold Coast Stadium. So it is, it's an interesting fall from grace. I know how many people jumped on. I know Spills was very frustrated. I know he made it pretty open on Twitter as well, how frustrated he was with that pick. But yeah, I mean, it's just one of those things where I think a big indicator, and I know you don't correlate to fantasy with everything, but a disparity in scoring between those two formats is a good indicator of how a player actually plays in the midfield. That's for sure.
Yeah. Jaden, being a bit of a stats guy, have you looked at much of Matt Rowell with and without Wits in the team? I know kind of a bit of the scoring's there, and kind of, is there a reason why Rowell's kind of fallen off? I mean, he's not had the preseason worries like Oliver's had.
Yeah, I haven't looked into Wits in particular, but I'm trying to pull up right now like his kind of score breakdown.
Because he was basically the most dominant player in the AFL for a period there, and then it's really, really not worked out.
So for the first 7 rounds, averaging 131, 65 of those were coming from possessions. I'm pretty sure at that point in the year, he was the number 1 in the comp, or around that, with Sarong up there as well. So that's dropped right down to 41 now. So he's lost 24 points out of winning possessions, probably contested, I'm guessing, a lot of those. And then his disposals dropped, 10 points per game. He's not getting any 1%ers. Clangers are about the same. So he's, down across the board. Halved his like scoring, like goals and everything like that. Tackles are about the same. So really the issue is winning the possession and then the subsequent disposal. That's where 24 plus, that's where the 34-point drop off is coming from. Pretty much all from that. So I mean, it's not really a surprise. Like, he was averaging 65 from possessions. The current leader is Sarong, and he's only doing 59 for the season. So 65 was a bit unsustainable, which is why I wasn't interested in getting him in at all. But yeah, that's where it all comes from, those possessions.
Fair enough. Sean saying, good day, Jaden, Big J, and all. Tom as well, obviously jumping on. Life's about having moments as good as Ginnivan did on Saturday. Yeah, it's a crazy one. And I know at the AFL, I don't know, I'll get your guys' thoughts on personalities in the AFL. It's something that seems to get stamped out a little bit. I'd love more of it, really. But it's always like, oh, we've got to be a bit PC sometimes. We can't have kind of the reactions, even NRL, and I'm thinking NFL as well from America, but we just don't really see as much of that. I mean, like we've got Collingwood, you got your Bobby Hills and stuff, and obviously Ginnivan's come from that kind of football factory. What's kind of your guys' thoughts on, you know, every team kind of having a couple of personalities that the fans can get around and, you know, obviously rile people up a bit?
I mean, yeah, I 100% agree. I think from a St Kilda supporter perspective, I really wish we did it more often. I really enjoy the soccer kind of atmosphere when it comes to celebrations and each player having their own celebrations. I know Brisbane do it to some degree with their songs after goals and whatnot, which get the crowd up and about. But Hawks have kind of found the magic recipe with how to play and how to celebrate. Like having individual celebrations is I reckon perfect. It brings out the characters in the players in a kind of environment where it doesn't roll up too many people. And, you know, Ginnivan is a perfect example of that, where he was kind of shunned upon at the Pies. And I know the Pies do a pretty tight ship with regards to professionalism, and it's been openly stated how professional their club is and how they go about things. And Ginnivan probably didn't suit that mold to some extent, and come to the Hawks and he's got Jath and all those young boys to really rub off, and they've, you know, gone from strength to strength in that regards. And even the senior boys, I think, are getting in it. I know the Hawks, I've seen on YouTube, do a lot of behind the scenes content, and it kind of shows their personalities and stuff like that. And then you just have to look at the camaraderie they have. They did that team photo at the end of the game, like your celebrations, like the FIFA celebrations, all that sort of stuff. And it just kind of, I know how traditionalists go about supporting their clubs. You just have to look at Melbourne to see how traditional that side gets. But it just, encapsulates a whole new crowd. And I think if the AFL are going to want to make the game global, you've got to try and find new ways to entice fans. And I know that the US are obsessed with how we go about tackling and all that, and that's been that for years. But if we can get players a bit more exposed into the open world with regards to celebrations and with regards to social media, and just allow them to be a bit more free to some extent, of course, which would be nice to see. And obviously from a Saints perspective, I know how much crap we get from opposition fans of being a soft club and a pushover. It'd be really nice to see. And I know Stocker does it really well. He's one player that I think's come out of his shell really nicely at our club. And just brings a different perspective to that club. And I think a lot of clubs would benefit from players like Ginnivan, who can show his true side in a club that is now flourishing.
Yeah. What do you reckon, Jade? More personalities in the AFL? You'd love to have those players that you can get around with and kind of get those exciting players in each team?
Yeah, definitely. I hope to see more of it. I know last year when Ginnivan started doing it, or maybe the year before, he got shut down pretty quick, but it's really good to see him in the environment. He got shut down more from the media point of view, but it's really good to see him at Hawthorn, and they're enjoying themselves. I actually think like the Hawks social media team is like one of the biggest improvers this year. Like obviously there's some of the other social medias that are notoriously well known, but I think the Hawks are killing it. They're going really well on the socials, and I can see why people love it. And that is also a big part, like, because other clubs will try and do something and then you'll see in the comments that people don't like it and I think it's cringe. So you've got to be really careful with like how you go about it. And I think that's part of the reason why the Hawks are becoming so lovable, because their social media team is doing really good stuff, and it paints a great picture to the broader AFL community.
Yeah, I think social media is one of those things that's terribly underrated. So Hawks, and then And then GWS is definitely one as well. Kind of moving down the comments. Thanks, Travis. What did you have? You had Dunk C this week, so not that great, but still scored 24.50. So, hey, doing pretty well there. Moving down the list. Yeah, Corey got 8 out of 9 tips this week, so not too bad. Looking at doing Sarong, so Rowell to Sarong this week with 2 trades. Hey, 2 trades left. Tell you what, hopefully you do well in the finals because 2 trades is going to carry you a long way, especially with all these, like, I'm going to say pod rucks being somewhat injured at the moment. If you had a TDK, you brought, spend up for him, 600K plus, and then, yeah, he's obviously out for the rest of the season there. Guy at work got 9 out of 9. Now, I don't know if you guys have, do you guys have work footy tipping competitions?
I had one last year, but not this year. But yeah.
What about you, Jaden?
No, I just focus on the fantasy. I can't be bothered to tip.
Fair enough. Yeah, we've got one at work, and I don't know what the winning is for it, but if you get the perfect 9, you get $100. So I've had 8 before, and I got it over the bye rounds, and then was told no, it doesn't count because it's only 6, it's not 9. So sucked in there, I guess. Sucks TDK is out for the rest of the season. Now we have to play shitnet. Yeah, it's an interesting one. I don't know what the stats are with him, with the Sam Walsh and whatnot, but yeah, I had someone on Twitter tell me that Mark Pitnet is the number 2 ranked ruckman in the AFL, and I have to suck it. So we'll see kind of what happens with Carlton from then on. Here's one for you guys. AFL Fantasy. So AFLW Fantasy. We know Jaden's kind of talked about it a little bit. You going to jump on, Tom?
I wouldn't be surprised. I know that from a soccer perspective, I get on the FPL train or try to at least during the off season. I know I've been paying a bit more attention to it with the Euros hype and whatnot. So I'll put my hand in the FPL pot and see how I go. But yeah, AFLW is, I think, an interesting one. I think I did it not last year, but the year before and did okay. It's obviously a bit harder when you don't know as much about the competition, but I think it is a really good way to get the competition in the public eye a little bit more. I know that content creators kind of shut up shop in general as an overall perspective in the off season because I know how much content you have to produce in season. But yeah, it'd be nice to I wouldn't be surprised if I end up dabbling into it. Just because I know how hard the girls work on the off season. I know I've been to a couple open training sessions at St Kilda and I know how excited the girls are to get into an AFLW season and how much it means to them, as much as there's been criticism from the media with the quality and whatnot and all that sort of stuff. But yeah, I think AFLW Fantasy is a good game to go, and it's a little bit different and a little bit less pressure with amount of hype it gets throughout the AFL season with regards to, having to do or not having to do well, but the pressure coming on social media and all that with regards to scores. And I think this is a bit of a take a step back, look at the games to pick who you want and see how you go kind of thing.
Yeah, I think one of the big things for me, Jaden's probably feeling the same way, is a lot of our sneaky forwards who turned into midfielders last season are now going to be midfield only, and it's going to be a bit of a tricky one, Jaden, to kind of pick our starting teams.
Yeah, I managed to find all the prices and positions before it's open, but yeah, it seems like pretty much all the players that were like midfielder / forward classification ended up being midfielders. So yeah, it does make it pretty cool. I think if you didn't play AFLW Fantasy last year and you kind of want to know what to expect, in general, it's quite it's an easier game to play. There's only 10 rounds that you have to worry about. So you don't have to think about the game for as long. And the good players tend to go pretty well again because it's quite a top-heavy kind of scoring system where the midfielders get it so much and not much for everyone else. So you can kind of just pick the best players and not really have to worry. And also last year, I'm pretty sure it will be the same, but you get 3 trades every single week and your squad is only like 21 players, I think.
Yeah, I think so.
Or
it wasn't
21, I think. So you can turn over your whole team really quickly, have a bit of fun with it, and like I think if you really love the fantasy and SuperCoach platforms and you think you're quite good at it, it's a really good way to just practice good coaching, because you've got a lot of ways to get creative and things like that. You aren't restricted by a lot of injuries or luck. You've got 3 trades and only 10 weeks, so you can really get creative. And yeah, that's what I like about it.
Yeah, definitely. I think that was the same for me, kind of picking out those players who did really well and whatnot, and then kind of going from there. The 3 trades a week was a good change over SuperCoach. And some people are saying SuperCoach AFLW. I'm not going to mock the game too much, but I don't know how we'd go with AFLW fantasy players scoring like 80s and then SuperCoach scoring like a 12. So yeah, it's gonna be a bit difficult there. Moving down the list, yeah, Tom Green did well as a captain for me this week. Fantastic. One of the few players. I think we struggled a little bit to get a lot of players over 100. There were some really tight games, and yeah, nice to kind of get the captain. Frankie's here with me as well. Can't pick a decent C, 24-42. How did you guys score this week?
I scored 24-85, which was frustrating. I mean, not frustrating because I'm happy with the score, but I could have easily scored over 2,500 if I didn't pick Butters. I think the more frustrating thing I can sympathise with Frankie is that literally anyone else would have scored better, which is annoying. I did
apart from a Dunkley or a Neil.
Yeah, and I don't have either, so I guess I avoided that shit. But I think the most frustrating, I was talking with a mate of mine who's a North Melbourne supporter. He's ranked, I think, 250th. I could have gone higher this round. Yeah, he's doing really well. But we were having a chat during the week and potentially captaining Tim English with obviously rucking against DeConning in the ruck. And he scored massive and it didn't pick him. But yeah, it's one of those things where if you go towards the end of the season, picking a captaincy is critical because, as you can see here, I mean, Frankie was in a similar boat to me with regards to his score really didn't impact, and it was kind of double unlucky if you went the VC Butters into C Neil, which was kind of unexpected. But yeah, you look at the captaincies, you almost have to, I would say, reduce your threshold of where you want to take your VC scores at the back end of the season, because you'd almost, I mean, obviously it depends on where you rank, right? If you rank 5K and want to push hard, you got to take that risk. But if you're ranked in the top 100, top 1,000, like I know SC Godfather is on Twitter, I mean, it's one of those things where you have to be a bit smart with the captaincy decision and make that decision whether you want to take the risk or bank the 110, because as we kind of all are aware, like a 130 and a 110 is only a 20-point difference. So it's not the be-all and end-all if your captain scores a 110, because you take that 100% compared to Butters 89 on weekend, that's for sure.
Yeah, it definitely feels like you need to be a bit more consistent and try and even bank those 120s that maybe we wouldn't have done at the start of the season. How did you go, Jaden, this week?
Yeah, 23-75. It's interesting you mentioned that because I just looked over my team and Butters was essentially the lowest scorer. So that's actually really painful. The only I guess a big letdown was Brodie Grundy, 72. But yeah, don't really expect too much against Oscar McInerney. So yeah, across the board, like 23-75 isn't amazing, but yeah, I'm pretty all right with it considering had a few outs and had to rely on the bench, so thought it was all right.
Yeah, I think I was very lucky and dodged a lot of the carnage. I'll put up my team review shortly, but I scored 25-66, I think, for my team with Butters C. So I mean, if we had picked a better captain, 2600's not off the cards there. So unlucky in that respect, but just pods like Ed Richards, who hasn't really done much for the past 3 weeks and then comes out with a 144, kind of helped me a little bit there. Vella's saying, only thing I did in SuperCoach right was Sarong as captain. Yeah, pretty much. We'll go over the rest of the games for the week, but what's your guys' thoughts on Sheezel? Now, there were some pretty crazy stats coming out for a 19-year-old player, but good player, bad player, wish he was in your team. Like, what do you guys reckon?
Yeah, freak show is probably the one word to put it. He's insane. There were obviously knocks on him from an outsider perspective, probably a bit of jealousy as well with regard to does he play well in the midfield? Can he actually continue his amazing run even in a contested game? And does he get missing like his Sinclairs and stuff where he, he's really nice off halfback and polished and all that, but when push comes to shove in a contested game, does he kind of fall apart? And I guess the answer to that is probably not, because it's almost gotten to a stage where North players are just actively looking for him to get the ball. I saw a passage of play. I did watch half of the game against the Blues. I don't know if it was Simpkin on the wing, but he basically took a risk on a 45 kick to actually hit up Sheezel to get it inside 50. He's your best kick by a mile. And I know McKerch is probably your next best in line for kicking inside 50. I know McKerch is a freak when it comes to his ability to kick the ball. But yeah, Sheezel, future captain of the club, you'd be nuts to get rid of him if you want to trade out or something. I think he's got captain potential written all over him, and he just can play anywhere around the ground, which is the most important thing. I think you look at your players like Butters and Neil, when they get shut out, it can be really disappointing. But I know, as frustrating as Steele's been with his injuries, and I make that comparison, he still can play forward, mid, can roll into defence, and his two-way runnings, the best of times, is elite when he's fit. But Sheezel can do that and be damaging in all three areas of the ground. I think some players really can fall apart a little bit when they get shifted from a tag or whatnot and play forward, back, and Sheezel can do all three. So I think, he's in your best 22 regardless of where he plays, whether he plays a forward pocket, if he's getting tagged, or a half back, or in the guards. He's up there with your best three players. That's 100% sure.
If he was like 195 centimeters, he'd probably jump in the ruck as well. What do you reckon, Jade?
Yeah, I love watching him play. And yeah, they love the ball in his hands. He had 15 handball receives on the weekend, so they're just giving the ball every single time. And yeah, it's great. I do wonder what position he'll be in SuperCoach next year. Could be like everything. But yeah, hopefully we can get him back and he's in a decent position for us.
It's crazy, right? Because obviously last year was his first year, being a rookie, whatnot, jumped up, ended up being a primo for a lot of us for the whole season. And then a lot of us started him this year. Imagine, I don't know if you could give me the stats maybe, off the top of your head, but has there ever been a SuperCoach player or a player in the AFL that we've selected for their entirety of their career in SuperCoach? Like, if Sheezel ends up being forward eligible and he's just played in the forward line for the rest of his career and plays this well, we could end up just picking him for the entire, at least like the first 10 years of his career in SuperCoach. Pretty crazy.
Yeah, definitely. The forward status will be very valuable if that happens. I can't think of any other players kind of in that boat. I guess many considered Nick Dacos in that position at the start of this year as a mid only. Maybe people call on him, especially as Collingwood free fall a bit. Like he's coming from a Pies fan, he's definitely a one-man team, and he has been all year. No one else has really helped him out. So from a SuperCoach perspective, you can kind of see that he might not be that next year. So yeah, I think Sheezel's a pretty good chance to be one of those players that we just pick and don't have to worry about it, because he's reliable and he can get it done in any area of the ground, which is amazing.
Yeah, definitely. All right, let's go through these. Hey Jen, how you doing? Thanks for jumping on. Michael's saying here, luckily 2 trades left, plenty of cover, just a few spots to go. Let's go through these. All right, so we've got 5 more games of the week left to go. Now, I don't know how this is going to work, but we'll make it work. Cool. All right, there you go. We'll go through these 3 and then the next. So, Geelong versus Bulldogs. Now, I don't know what's happened with Geelong, but they're kind of similar to Lions a little bit at the Gabba. Their home ground support, like home ground fortress, hasn't been as strong this year, it feels like. Have you guys kind of pictured that?
Oh, I don't know. It's one of those things where I don't in particular, I don't think the weather helped played a big part in that. I don't think Geelong coped well with the amount of rain that came down in Geelong. I remember watching it or flicking on the coverage, and the actual camera footage looked terrible with how much rain had got onto the ground. Like parts of the ground were basically sodden, so it really doesn't help Geelong's game style. Having said that, I just don't think it's not as a bigger fortress as it was in previous years. whether or not that correlates with Geelong's kind of up and down season. But I think furthering on to that, I think teams have started to figure Geelong out a little bit. Like Geelong like to play a really clean brand of footy, basically a glorified game of keepings off, get the ball inside 50 to Hawkins and Cameron. Hawkins is not getting any younger, so he's one that's fallen off a cliff a little bit. And Jez is soft tissue prone injury kind of guy who's not moving as well as he used to. But it seems like any side who provides that manic pressure, and Dogs are very good at that, especially in a sloppy game like with the likes of Richards and Bontempelli dominating, kind of correlates to the opposition team dominating because, Geelong just can't keep up. They don't have the leg speed around the ground to help them. Like Mitch Duncan's, 30 plus. You got Graham Myers and Brad Close who play, they're playing up the forward line rather than the midfield. They just don't have the talent in there to keep up with the speed. Like maybe give it a year or two and see Jai Clark and Sean Manago in there. But I think they're probably holding on to a couple of their stars a little bit too long. And I think they're starting to get exposed a little bit, especially when they turn the ball over. And in a game like Saturday where clean keepings off footy really doesn't work in that situation, the Dogs just killed him.
Is it fair to say, Jaden, that they really haven't recovered from Selwood leaving, and it's probably a big factor in kind of how the team's going at the moment?
I don't know. The record at home, it's not perfect, but they haven't been that bad. Like they've only had under a goal losses to Port and GWS. So apart from this one game, I think they've gone all right. And they got smashed. And I think partly because of the midfield, they just have no midfield at all. And the Dogs have the best. So it's not really that surprising that's where they got smashed. And in a game where the ground is not in great condition and you want your midfield to dominate, it's probably if you could pick any team to play in those conditions, you would probably not pick the Dogs. You'd pick anyone else.
Yep.
I don't think they're going that bad. It's just very one of those games where you could kind of come up with the narrative before it actually happened. So I wasn't that surprised. And they're still in a decent position.
Yeah, fair enough. Moving down the list, so we got Port versus Richmond, and I think for half the game, Richmond were very, very, very close into it. And I almost thought, is this going to be Ken Hinkley retirement game? I don't know about you guys, but Richmond obviously fell back a little bit. And then I think Nank got subbed out halfway through the game as well, which obviously didn't help. But 116 to 75 there. Port Adelaide get a nice win and keep up with the pace. Sunday. Now, Sunday, 11:40. I have not been as excited to watch a game as the Lions versus Sydney. And that 2-point win, mate, it's it definitely showed what both teams can do, and two teams that should be pushing hard for finals, right?
Yeah, I think this could be a preview to the grand final if all things work out otherwise. Just two teams that thrive under pressure. Like you see a lot of teams just crumbling, like Carlton almost lost against North and should have probably lost based off their performance. Port fell apart in the first half. Yeah, Lions are starting to really show the competition why they made the grand final last year, and their best players are coming to the form at the right time. Swanee's obviously been best team by a mile for the first good portion of the season and kind of obviously fell off a cliff in the recent weeks, and injuries are not helping with them. I know McInerney's out for a while. Papley looks pretty, Hayward looked a bit dodgy. So I think so if Sydney come back with their full strength side, I could almost say they beat the Lions. I remember we had DR on in our podcast in recent weeks, and he mentioned we talked about the fact that what the change was in regards to the Lions falling off a cliff after halftime and almost losing games they should win, and they seem to turn that around a little bit. And they're players that kind of go quiet in halves, like your Zach Baileys and Cam Rayners were standout performers in this one. And I think, I think that the biggest thing in that game was two teams that can actually compete under pressure in a high-level environment and actually not crumble like other teams have.
Yeah, definitely. Really got to see what happens with Sydney with a couple of these players who, like the Papleys have kind of been a mainstay, and hopefully maybe a Sheldrick and a few of these other depth players come through. Just sucks Gould's been, kicked out of the team, because would have been nice to finally see him picked in a game of football, but it is what it is, Jade.
Yeah, yeah, he's no longer around. One thing I noticed in this game that was like, because it was so high pressure and it was a great game to watch, the SuperCoach totals, like there wasn't a lot of scoring that actually happened in the game, because it was pretty high pressure, pretty like not really scrappy, but it was just such a high pressure game that there wasn't a lot of points that went around, because there just wasn't that much I guess ball use and things like that. So yeah, this game was the most scaled up game of the week. So for example, Zorko by my model would have scored 111. Oh, no, sorry, 100, 119, 120, but he actually scored 129. So he just got 9 points because the game was so low scoring and it has to get up to 3,300. So, this was the lowest scoring game of the round, which meant to get up to 3,300, all the players had to get a bit of a bonus. So, yeah, for someone like Neil and Dunkley, who didn't really perform, they probably wouldn't have had to do that much more to get rewarded for it. But yeah, when the midfields don't really dominate, because both of these teams are difficult to match up against as a midfield. So when the midfielders don't dominate and there's not a lot of dominance by them, they can't really get all the points. So yeah, that game there was plenty of points to go around to those that did perform, and those who didn't really missed out, because there's a chance to just go okay and get a really good score out of it.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I'm just checking out fan footy at the moment, and surprisingly, Sydney actually scored more points than Brisbane in terms of SuperCoach. But as you say, a lot of these players, a lot of these mids that you thought might have gone massive just didn't. And, mate, yeah, it was nice not having a lot of big players from both of these teams outside of a Goulden and a Heaney that I think most people would have. Because your Brody Grundys and whatnot, your Dunkleys, and then Neil as well, both struggling in terms of scoring on SuperCoach, where it could have been like a massive blowout there. Corey was saying there were 700 points left in the last quarter at 3/4 time. That's bonkers. That is absolute bonkers there. So yeah,
well, there you go.
Stuff. Moving down the list. So yeah. Kind of last two games of the week. I hate to say Melbourne punching bag, but does feel like a bit of a Melbourne punching bag at the moment. It's who can get the wins. And, we had Jen before talking about Max Gawn really needing to come back. I think Melbourne in general really need Max Gawn to come back, because I don't know if you guys caught the Tom Fullerton comments by Goodwin this week, but yeah, basically said, well, the guy can't win hit outs. He's there to get tall and, there for some experience, and that's kind of not what they want. What do you guys take away from this game?
I mean, I didn't watch it per se because I was out on Sunday, but I think just based off the team itself, I mean, you can use that as an excuse all you want. You knew Gawn was missing. I think he was on Triple M, well, it would have been last week, saying, look, I want to push for 1 week or two, but docs think it's 2 to 3. So I think Melbourne clearly knew it was going to be out for a little bit at least. The best teams, though, they work around it and make sure if your ruck's not up to scratch, your midfield at least is doing the job to nullify the opposition ruckman. Obviously, Petrarca in there would have helped tenfold, but I think the really disappointing thing for D's fans is they knew going in that game they're playing against the top 3 midfield in the comp with Sarong, Brayshaw, and Young, and they really just didn't do much to nullify that. Brayshaw went off the chain. Young did his thing, and Sarong was, crazy as well. At least with the likes of Viney, Neil Bull, and Oliver, surely as a midfield group in itself with an inexperienced Fullerton, could have just said, come on, let's try and nullify these guys. Let's get even in the clearances. As hard as it may be, they've got the midfield power to do so. And I think that's been a really disappointing thing for the Ds. I know Trent Rivers has been playing midfield. He's almost looked like their best centre clearance player based off an eye test in the recent weeks. But yeah, I'd be really disappointed if I was a D supporter getting smacked against the Dockers, who look dodgy at the best of times. And the Ds look like if they do make finals, they need to be playing at the G. Otherwise, they could be in a world of pain because they just can't really play on any other ground, it seems like. And obviously, Gawn is a MCG specialist when it comes to his ability to play that big ground of the G. But yeah, Optus is a very similar kind of dimensions to the G. So yeah, it'd be interesting to see exactly what went wrong for Melbourne. And I think when Fullerton going forward, that would have impacted their forward structure to some degree as well. Who takes the second ruck role, and Van Rooyen usually does that. But yeah, disappointing for the Ds, and I don't think they're a real threat come finals time. I don't think their players are up to scratch. And yeah, Oliver playing off a half a preseason or a quarter of a preseason doesn't help either. And yeah, it'd be interesting to see how they go on the back end of the year. That's for sure.
Jaden, mistake Melbourne getting rid of Grundy so quickly?
Not really. I think they kind of had to. It's probably just one of those things where, like, I've heard someone say that you either have too many rucks or not enough rucks on your list.
Okay.
So last year they had too many, and now they don't have enough. Like, you can never get it perfect. So, like, I think they had to move him on, just based on, he wasn't really used last year, so you might as well, move him on. It's just unfortunate. Gawn has gone down from a pretty innocuous type of injury, but yeah, overall, I think this game was fairly similar to like the Dogs one, where like you've just got one incredible midfield against probably the worst in the comp at the moment with the players that they're missing. So it's just one of those ones where, like, you could kind of see it happening, and they're just way too good out of the midfield. Like, the clearances were just off the show. I'm pretty sure it was like one or two short of the record for clearance differential. So they got pretty close to the best clearance result of all time, which is crazy. You shouldn't expect that in 2024. So, yeah.
Yeah, Corey's saying here, halftime it was like 90 disposals compared to Melbourne's 20. Yeah, a bit of a thrashing there, as we can see by the scoring. I wonder if, Jaden, it's a bit of a case of, well, maybe you can have too many rucks, but you do a bit of a Hawthorn and start playing them as key defenders or key forwards until you actually need, enough. Could have just been a Grundy problem, can't actually play anywhere else.
Yeah, like they're both premier ruckmen in the comp, so like then it was a weird decision at the time. Like, they were pretty confident could have worked, and you look at the other team, and it's kind of the same thing with Darcy and Jackson. Like, there's plenty of talk around whether they need both or whether it was worth signing them, and Darcy was immense, so yeah, it was great to watch. And yeah, like, they just don't have any cover behind Gawn, which is maybe a bit of an oversight. Like that, where they've got Fullerton and Verrill, and the good one doesn't pick any of them. So that's probably more of the problem than Grundy.
Yeah, it feels like, Tom, that was something that Brisbane did very well, right? A couple of years ago, playing your Archie Smith and whatever as a forward. So at least they got kind of that ruck relief role in case Oscar McInerney came down.
Yeah, I think with the two ruck debate, I don't know if I mentioned it with you or someone else, but you look at the teams that have won premierships, they really don't have a glorified ruckman. I mean, Gawn is one of them when Melbourne won the premiership, but yeah, Brisbane obviously have McInerney now, and he's been the dominant ruckman for a while. But it just shows that if you do have a mobile ruckman that can push forward, and I bring it back to St Kilda because I watch him most weeks, but you look at Marshall, and we cry out that he potentially could work better as a ruck forward, just because essentially how ruckmen get their goals is they push hard forward and hope for a mismatch because they've outrun the other ruckman into the forward 50, and they get a smaller defender mismatch, which is really what's dangerous. And Brisbane, whilst they weren't great when the likes of Archie Smith and all that were there, they were kind of experimenting with that position, and it kind of works well now because they got Danaher, who is essentially a ruckman height. But yeah, Melbourne, it's interesting that maybe they could have done something differently with their ruck forward position if they, try to play another tool down there to help. But yeah, it's Freo does it really well with Jackson, who's a pretty much as a sole ruck is one of the best in the comp, let alone a dual ruck with Darcy. So yeah, I think the moving forward, if you are playing that 2 ruck combination, I think it is really important that at least one of your ruckmen can play forward, because as we saw in the Melbourne scheme of things with Grundy and Gawn, 2 standalone rucks is not great. And I think Grundy mentioned it in I think it was Dylan Friend's podcast. I'm pretty sure he came on and just said it wasn't working for him with regards to his ability to play forward. He was saying, look, I think he was getting actual coaching from another, I don't know if it was external source or within the club, in a VFL game, basically trying to coach him how to play forward. And we see him how he plays in Sydney now. He just isn't as a forward ruckman. Like, he's a dominant contested beast around the ground, and that's how he dominates the ruck. And that's how Sydney have done so well. And I don't think Melbourne utilise him to his best potential, because they have gone who can do exactly the same thing, if not better. So yeah, playing 2 ruckmen and then expecting one to just naturally become a key forward and a ruckman at the same time just doesn't work out.
It's one of those things where being tall at football, being tall doesn't mean you're naturally good at football. So who knew, right? Last game of the weekend, Carlton versus North Melbourne. I mean, we talked about Harry Sheezel a little bit there, but it was tough being a North Melbourne fan and watching this game. We were in the contest for such a long time. Halfway through the 4th, Carlton kind of get a couple of okay umpire calls and then take the game home. Jaden, what did you see from this game? Any standouts outside of Harry Sheezel being a Jet? What kind of stood out for you there?
I didn't watch much of this game, but yeah, I think North did pretty well to be in front at stages, and yeah, we're pretty much in it right until the end, so that's pretty promising. And yeah, they've got a lot of players that are kind of fitting into a role now that looks like a bit more of a team, I think. So they've had issues in the last few years where players just get picked and then dropped. But if they're starting to get players in positions that make sense, like Bailey Scott was really good. Pretty sure wing. And yeah, Stevens worked well. So both of those together. So yeah, they're starting to get a decent structure, and obviously the big man Cherry has really helped out. Like, he's the best stoppage ruck in the comp. Like, no one can move him. He just grabs it out, and
I love this stat. Just like, I think I'm going to quickly check now. What's his? You probably have this quicker than I'll have this, but what's his stats? I know he was like 3rd for tackles, but what is he for tackles at the moment? Where's tackles? Clearances, tackles. Cool. So Tristan Cherry's 4th. Have we ever seen a time where a ruckman is 4th in tackles? Like, seriously, this is a ruckman 4th in tackles. I don't know. It's just a bit of a bonkers thing, I think. Sorry for cutting you off, Jaden, but yeah, just
that's fine.
He's a good player.
Yeah, I've heard some talk about whether you would want to start with him in the next season for SuperCoach. Like, he's probably because he's got a really good floor, like from that tackling and like his stoppage stuff. Like, he's a bit different to the type of player that would be relevant, where they rely on getting the ball around the ground as well. Like, you think about English and Marshall, Luca Jackson and Gawn, and even Grundy a bit, they get around the ground, and they're the kind of most relevant players. But yeah, we've really seen how dominant a ruck can be just from being a ruck. They don't have to do anything else. So yeah, that's what I love about Cherry, and like, he's been a smash pick for anyone who started with him.
Yeah, I mean, 400K, right, Tom? If you started this guy, you'd be pretty happy. Even just being one of those people that didn't have to trade one of their ruck spots throughout the year.
Oh, yeah, 100%. He's been so dominant. It probably shows why St Kilda was so desperate to pick him up, and everyone thought we were crazy. So, yeah, Helmet Heads definitely showed why he's almost a premier ruck in the competition with his second efforts for sure.
If only you guys spent a second-round pick, life would be a lot different at the moment. Yeah, one of those things. Is he number 3 ruckman at the moment in the AFL? Obviously, we talk about Gawn and then Grundy. Is Cherry getting there for All Australian, or probably needs another year?
It's a good question. SuperCoach wise is obviously another story, but I think we all appreciate from a SuperCoach perspective how well he goes around the ground and contested tackles and things like that. Marshall did it as well as him with regards to his second efforts to the contest and things like that. But I think from a AFL perspective, you probably want to be looking at hit-outs to advantage and things like that, and how well the midfielder are able to utilise the ruck in the contest. And while Sherry is up and about and really dominates as another midfielder for North when the ball hits the ground, he's probably one thing he probably has to work on is his hit-outs to advantage and making the best use of his ball in hand. That's why Grundy and Gawn, they basically do all three things perfectly. They do, and in their prime, sorry. They can get down the ground for an intercept mark. They can tap hit-outs to advantage for fun, and they're so dominant in that regards. You look at Lloyd Meek, for example, and the other reason I bring him up is because I'm an owner for the last fortnight. Actually watching him, because of how big he is and the new rule in place, he just basically blocks whoever he's got and just taps it to who he wants. It's actually really effective. And he barely touches the ball otherwise, but he still scores 100 just from tap-outs to advantage. So I think from an AFL perspective, you look at probably Gawn is still the premier ruckman. You could debate between English. I mean, I don't think English is in the top three anymore. Grundy probably the next best with how strong he's been. And then you could flip a coin to anyone, really. As much as a St Kilda supporter, I reckon I wish Marshall was in the top three. Probably just isn't there this season. He's probably dipped a little bit in form. But yeah, I'd say Sherry's definitely top five. That's for sure.
Yeah, Jaden, do you think it's kind of a case of, well, if your team's not winning games, you're not really in AA selection as a ruckman?
Yeah, I think it'd be pretty hard for him to get in. From like some SuperCoach stats point of view, he's actually the number one ruck for total points this year, which is pretty good. But he's only like 30 in front of Gawn, who's played two less games. And Tom is right about the ruck. So if you just filter to the SuperCoach points scored from ruck-related acts like hit-outs or when they grab it, things like that, like hit-outs to advantage, if you just base it on those points, Gawn is the best. He averages 47.5 points just from the ruck. And Cherry's number 6 at 41.8. So above him is Nankervis, Riley O'Brien, Lloyd Meek is there, as you mentioned, and Briggs. So, like, yeah, that's probably that little thing that he's just needs to get up there a bit more in because he doesn't do much around the ground compared to Grundy. So, yeah, if you're going to be that out-and-out ruck, you probably want to be a bit higher in that department.
Yeah, definitely. I think maybe, depending on price, I could be pushed into picking Meek and Cherry next year. So that'd be kind of something a bit different and exciting. We'll see what happens. Hopefully, we won't need to change selections because I think, like, a lot of us have traded out Gawn now due to injury. We knew it was coming at some point. A lot of us traded out Grundy after the bye or during his bye, and that hasn't worked out. So yeah, kind of lock and set and forget, right? Cool. All right. Well, that seems to be our run through of the games. I think the chat's definitely fallen off a little bit, but that's fine there. Thank you very much, fellas, for coming on. It's been a good show. A little bit different than kind of what we were looking at throughout the season and what's happened. But, I know last minute things are kind of hard to jump on by, but thank you very much. Appreciate you guys for jumping on and helping out today as you have.
No worries at all. Pleasure to be on.
Jaden,
for having me.
Where can the fans find you if they haven't already?
Yeah, the main place is over on Twitter at Jaden_Poposky. I'm over there. Yeah, post a bit of fantasy stuff, a bit of SuperCoach stuff, although I've been a bit slack. I've just updated my site with the SuperCoach stuff because I've just run it all for this pod. So, yeah, I've updated it over on the site. If you want to go over there, statsbyjaden.com.au.
Are you going to jump on the AFL fantasy train and do a whole bunch of preseason stuff for them that people can keep an eye out?
Yeah, in the women's, I've done pretty well in it. Like, I've won 3 hats at 3 attempts. Cool. So, yeah, I love it. And I think, like I said before, there's not as many people that play it, so you've got a really good chance to like be creative and, yeah, like I think like the lack of content around it means that, like, if you put the effort in, you can go pretty well, because there aren't people out there that just get all that content just like in one podcast and then they just like do everything and copy everything. Like, there's not really any of that, because you can just put in the work yourself and you'll go pretty well. Like, you get rewarded for the effort you put in.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's what I found. I think Joe and I are going to jump on and do a bunch of content as well, because it's something different that a lot of people don't have, and it's fun, right? It's not like SuperCoach, where I think you can definitely feel like you once you've fallen behind, that's it. Those 3 trades definitely help, and I know from last year we saw a few players jump up almost 200k in 1 week, so you can definitely catch back up and get anyone. Tom, where can people find you? What have you got coming up over the next few weeks?
So we're primarily on X under SuperCoach Mates or SC Mates YouTube channel. Back up and running, as we mentioned to our audience. We had a bit of a hiatus last year with all 3 of us having different commitments with work basically hit at the same time, which made it difficult to upload consistently. It's a kudos to you guys as well with how consistently you guys do. I know how hard we copped it on our end with regards to trying to upload and trying to juggle work and other commitments. So yeah, at least me and Nathan, the other co-host of our show, is back on board, and hopefully try and get some consistency in uploads, and hopefully our schedules align that we can do so. Moving forward, we've started what we called SC Clubs, which is kind of a deeper dive into each team and how they've gone, obviously at the moment with the mid-year recaps, but pushing towards end-of-season recaps with most teams as we kind of drag on the content. We were lucky to obviously have you on, Jay, to talk on North Melbourne, so check that out if you haven't already. We've had with a great chat about the Lions. We've had a great chat with Jake from Saints TV, so obviously not only SuperCoach content creators, but also fan TV channels as well, which I think are a really important part of social media with regards to an access to the clubs that we probably don't do well enough as an AFL organisation to have elite access into behind the scenes content. But head over to our YouTube channel if you want to listen to that sort of stuff, as well as our kind of weekly reviews as we do on a weekly basis.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, some of the stuff you post up on Twitter as well, like recaps and whatnot throughout the week's been pretty good. Jaden, you've already got a fan. Corey's jumping on saying, thanks for your spreadsheet. Love it already. Done my research. Just waiting for AFLW to open. I hope it's soon, because my understanding is that the women's game, does it start in August? Is it like August 30, the game, like it actually starts the season?
Yeah, like when the AFL men's finals are on. So I reckon it'll open pretty soon, based on the fact that I found the data from the site already. So I've been working with that. But yeah, so they've uploaded everything ready to go, so it should open pretty soon, is my guess.
Fair enough. Maybe we'll have you on the show and we'll do some AFLW directed content there, and we'll see how we go.
Sounds good.
All right, guys. Thank you for watching. You know we've got our drive home on Thursday at 5:30. Tell Joe, hey, Joe, we missed you today, but we had a couple of amazing guests to cover it on there. Because here at the Centre Bounce, we do the hard work, so you guys don't have to. Bye for now.